Welcome to Marking the End Times. I'm Mark Hitchcock, and I'm so glad you've joined us for this program that we're videoing here on Thanksgiving Day. And I'm so grateful to God for all of you who subscribe to this YouTube channel, but also for all of you who subscribe to endtimes.com. We appreciate you more than you will ever know. And we're very thankful for your interest in what we do here and for your support and for your just constant encouragement. We're very grateful for that, and you're a great blessing to us. And all of us here in this country have a great deal to be thankful for on this Thanksgiving. Well, I've titled today's video, What's the Deal? And I want to discuss the peace deal that's been approved by Israel and Hamas. This temporary truce or ceasefire in Gaza. So we'll get to that in just a moment. Here in a bit, we're going to go to a subscriber-only section, and I'm going to answer some questions that you all have sent in. One question is that in the days of Noah, since God had Noah build a larger ark than just for his family, for all the animals, could it be that at the rapture that animals are taken to heaven as well? So kind of another question about animals in the future. Another question is, will we still be male and female in heaven, and are there female angels? Another question about why wouldn't Jesus have made it clear to Peter before Acts chapter 10 that these unclean foods were now unclean? And a final question kind of relating to the blood moons back in 2014 and 2015, and Pharaoh's dream about 7 fat calves and 7 skinny calves in Genesis 41, and kind of the last blood moon, and it was 7 years ago until now. So that's going to fall on Rosh Hashanah. So do we think there's any kind of a connection there between that? So we'll look at those questions here a bit when we get into the subscriber only section. But as I've said in today's video, what I want to focus on is what this truce, this temporary truce or treaty, peace treaty between Hamas and Israel means. What it means for Israel in the near future, but also how this temporary peace is just another peace agreement in a long line of truces and treaties that I believe are paving the way for the peace that the Antichrist will bring when he comes onto the world scene. Again, one of the most important events of the end times, Daniel 9:27, an agreement, some peace agreement between the Antichrist and Israel, the event that starts the 7-year tribulation period. A lot of people have this idea that the rapture, when the rapture takes place, that starts the 7-year tribulation. Now, the rapture ends the church age. The church will be caught up to heaven, but sometime after that, the Antichrist will come on the world scene in the midst of all this chaos and bring peace to this Middle East crisis that's been going on now for 75 years. And he'll broker that peace deal, and that's the event that starts the 7-year tribulation. So it's a very, very important event in the future in biblical prophecy. So what's the deal? What's the deal about this truce there, and what it means for now, what it means for the future? Well, just a little bit of background here. Almost 1.7 million people have been displaced in Gaza since October the 7th. Up to 50% of the buildings in northern Gaza have been damaged, and many of them have been destroyed. And so this peace deal, this truce, has been brokered, and is brokered by Qatar and by Egypt and by the United States. Let me just give a few details about this. Israel's cabinet has approved this deal. It's a deal for the release of hostages that were seized by Hamas on October the 7th. And that's being done in exchange for a pause in the fighting in Gaza. The agreement is the release of about 50 hostages, Israeli hostages, women and children, in exchange for a 4-day truce in Israel's air and ground campaign. And there's a potential held out for an extension, saying that for each extra day that's added, 10 hostages will be released. Now think about that for a moment. That's going to put Israel's leaders to the test, because you've got 4 days for these 50 hostages, but then they're going to have to decide, do they want to give another day? Because each day that goes by, it's going to allow Hamas to kind of reform and regroup and resupply. But you're going to have an outcry in Israel. As you can imagine, if that's one of your family members there, you're going to be saying, well, it's just one more day and 10 more of these hostages can be released. So this is going to prolong the conflict, no doubt, much, much longer as Hamas is going to, again, be able to kind of regroup. However long this truce ends up lasting, it's going to allow them a lot of time to make all kinds of further preparations. It's just going to prolong this conflict. But we need to be praying for Israel's leaders during this time, because it's going to take the wisdom of Solomon for them to make decisions about, how long do we prolong this to get more of these hostages back. It's been said, although it's not really a part of the official agreement, I don't believe, but it's something that's understood. About 150 Palestinians will be released as well as part of this. Supposedly there's no terrorists, but just 150 Palestinians will be released. But what we see here in this is just another in a seemingly endless line of truces and treaties and ceasefires that Israel has entered into since 1948. And I thought maybe it might be helpful to just paint in a little bit of background and look at Israel's past wars and past peace agreements. Israel's first modern war was in 1948 when the modern state of Israel was founded. They were attacked by 5 nations simultaneously. And at the end of this war in 1949, armistice agreements were entered into with Egypt and Lebanon and Syria and Jordan. So there was a kind of an agreement that was entered into, an armistice was signed. But really, Israel's war with Syria and with Jordan and with Egypt was really continuing. There was no end to it. You had the Suez War in 1956. And that ended under pressure by the U.S. and Soviet Union. There was really no peace treaty, but the UN just created a kind of a buffer zone and put forces there. You had the Six-Day War in 1967 that ended with a ceasefire agreement, and then there was UN Resolution 242 that the parties agreed to. Then you had the Yom Kippur War, the October War in 1973, which again, remember this invasion of Israel on October 7th, of 2023 was 50 years and a day after that October War. And that eventually led to the peace negotiations, including the Camp David Accords, that led to peace between Israel and Egypt in 1979. So there was a series of ceasefires and peace negotiations that ultimately led to the end of what had been basically a 30-year conflict between Egypt and Israel. So out of that Yom Kippur War came this peace with Egypt. Then you had the first Lebanon War in 1982 that dragged on for almost 2 decades. Then you had the first Intifada. Intifada is an Arabic word that means an uprising. The first Intifada was from 1987 to 1993. You remember what ended that was the Oslo Accords, where Yasser Arafat and Yitzhak Rabin shake hands there at the White House with President Clinton in the background. And that set up a framework for the West Bank and Gaza and how all of that was to be governed. Then in 1995, you had the Oslo II Accords that were entered into. Well, then in 2000, you had the second Intifada, the second uprising, and there was a ceasefire from that in 2003. Then you had the second Lebanon War in 2006 that ended with a ceasefire resolution. And then you had a series of what's called the Gaza Wars. Israel's been involved in several conflicts with Hamas, the terrorist group that governs the Gaza Strip. There was Operation Cast Lead in 2008 and 9. There was Operation Pillar of Defense in 2012. There was Operation Protective Edge in 2014. Then Israel had an 11-day conflict with Hamas in 2011. And that conflict ended when Egypt negotiated a ceasefire along with the U.S. and Qatar. Again, just like what's happened here recently. And then beginning on October 7th, when Hamas invaded the southern part of Israel, there was an operation by Israel called Operation Swords of Iron. And that's the one that's still ongoing. But now this ceasefire, this 4-day temporary ceasefire has been signed. People kind of divide this up differently, but depending on how you divide up these different conflicts, but Israel has had, in its 75-year modern history now, 16 different wars or conflicts. Think about that. That's about one every 5 years. So Israel's modern history is just one long series of conflicts. And then there's ceasefires, and there's treaties, and there's truces. But they never last very long. But notice, as I went through that, they're always mediated or negotiated or brokered by outside forces. But what we see in Israel is just this enduring quest for peace, this elusive phantom of peace. Now, a couple of weeks ago, the video that I did was titled War and Peace. And what I've said here today is kind of piggybacking on what we said there. But what we see today, there's never been such an outcry for peace in the Middle East as we see today. I mean, none of these past wars, because we have now 24/7 television coverage. We have social media. There's global outrage and outcry. There's major protests and demonstrations. Millions of people gathering in demonstrations, gathering in Europe, in the Middle East, in Asia, and the United States. We have global leaders all over the globe calling and pleading for a ceasefire. And so we can see today, unlike any time in history, that the world is ripe for a comprehensive solution to this Middle East peace crisis. Again, these are always negotiated by outside forces. You know, this most recent ceasefire is by the U.S., Qatar, and Egypt. And that will be true in the end times. The Antichrist will rise from a reunited, revived Roman Empire, from somewhere within the confines of the old Roman Empire. And after the rapture, you can just imagine the chaos. And the act that will catapult the Antichrist onto the global scene is a peace agreement he will broker with Israel. And it will even include the Temple Mount area. So he's going to be hailed by the world. You can see today that anyone that can solve that mess over there would be hailed as a world savior. And so the world stage is set for his arrival, especially this condition in Israel, and just the global outcry and outrage we've seen over this. And all that remains is for the rapture to take place. And the rapture can happen at any moment. And we need to live in light of that day. And you and I need on this Thanksgiving Day and this Thanksgiving season to be thankful for Jesus and his coming. I'll just close with this, a word of encouragement to all of us. 5 times in the New Testament, you have the words, thanks be to God. Thanks be to God. But one of those is in 1 Corinthians 15 in relationship to the rapture. If you read 1 Corinthians 15, beginning in verse 50 and following, it's all about the coming rapture. And down in verse 54, it says, but this imperishable, this perishable will have put on the imperishable, and this mortal will have put on immortality. Then it will come about the saying that is written, death is swallowed up in victory. O death, where is your victory? O death, where is your sting? The sting of death is sin, and the power of sin is the law. But thanks be to God. There it is, those words, thanks be to God, 5 times in the New Testament, who gives us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. So one of the things that we can be thankful for is that Jesus is coming back. He's going to give us the victory as he comes back and raises those who've died and raptures those of us who are alive to heaven. And so we can be thankful on this Thanksgiving and this Thanksgiving season that Jesus is going to come back. He's going to take us to heaven to be with him, and that we can live in light of that. Well, again, as always, thank you so much for joining us. For those of you who are subscribers, we'll go into that subscriber-only section in a moment. But I want to mention, if you're not a subscriber, go to endtimes.com. You can become a subscriber for just $7 a month, and I think it'll be a great blessing in your life if you do that. Again, thank you to all of you, and we'll go now to our subscriber-only section, and we'll answer these questions.